All right.
Great.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Andia Winslow, and I am the host of the World Channel series Doc World. And this month at World, we're celebrating women. We're celebrating groundbreaking leaders who are knocking down doors, others who are illuminating the path for future generations. And today, I'm so excited to be joined by two phenomenal filmmakers whose stories are going to be for fighting for equality, fighting for visibility, fighting for empowerment of women. Please help me welcome two filmmakers. Calling in from New York today, we have Sadiqa Moshadidi, whose film is called Facing the Dragon. And from LA, we have Jenny Murray, whose film Las Sandinistas actually just won last year at South by Southwest. So this is kind of your anniversary of celebration. So thank you both for joining us today. And we're going to talk about some films. First, Sadiqa, if you could introduce yourself briefly and talk about Facing the Dragon.
Well,
Sadiqa, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you are coming in clear.
Okay, great. Thank you for the introduction. I'm a filmmaker. I live in New York City. My family is from Afghanistan, and I grew up here in the States, and I decided to make this film 6-7 years ago. I started working on the idea for this film, and it's a story about two women caught between motherhood and ambition in a very, very difficult place like Afghanistan. One is a politician, and the other one is a journalist. It's a story really about two women caught between sort of irreconcilable places in a very difficult place like Afghanistan. So, yeah, I finished the film last year, in June of last year, and we're very excited that it's going to be on Doc World soon. And it's a film that took me a long time to make. I filmed it for 4 years, and I shot the whole film myself, directed it in Afghanistan. And I hope people find it. I hope people see a little bit of themselves in the stories of these women.
Coming to Doc World.
زنا کلشان هنا ما کل ما خواستیم که برو که طالبا رفتن ما آزاد شدیم ما زندگی خود از سر جور میکنیم.
Two extraordinary women fight for equality and democracy in Afghanistan.
یک ما اولین خانم بودم که دکتر دمو پنجشش ولسوالی اولین زن دکتر بودم. و بعداً اولین زن بودم که استاد شدم به نام ازی که کاندید میکنم.
بعد از اون خواستم یک کس باشم که بتونم صدای همین مظلوم کسایی که مظلومین بود، چون خود ما از جمله هم مظلومینی بودیم که در وقت در بزد ظلم هیچ نمیتونستیم صدای خود بکشیم، هر چیز تحمل میکردیم.
But as the U.S. withdraws troops and aid, Nilafar and Shakila face renewed threats.
طالبا که دشمن نام زن هستن نمیگذاره که زن بیایه و به یک کرسی سیاسی راه پیدا کنه.
ما خبرنگار هستیم.
چون در طی 4 سال وکالت من نتونستم متاسفانه بعد از وکیل شدن در حوزه انتخاباتی خود برم. متاسفانه به خاطر که اونجا ناامن بود و من نمیتونستم رفتم.
They struggle with difficult choices amid the increasing violence.
حالا میخوایم برم یک جای آرام، اولادایم آرام باشه، درس بخونن.
من ناتوانی جسمی، روحی، روانی همه را در وجود خودم حس میکنم. به او خاطر یک تعهد دارم که در وطن میباشم تا زمانی که مسئولیت امانت مردم سرشانه‌ایم است.
Facing the Dragon on Doc World.
And next up, we have Jenny Murray going to talk about Las Sandinistas. Tell us about yourself and your film.
Sure. So thank you for having me again. And Sadiqa's movie looks great. I was really excited to see that. So let's see. So I'm from Chicago originally, and I grew up in an Irish Catholic family. And yeah, I got really excited by these stories in Nicaragua in 2013. So I studied Latin American film in college and Latin American history. And then, yeah, through a combination of going to visit a friend on the border of Costa Rica and Nicaragua and researching, just a lot of research about the revolution, I ended up finding the stories of these women that just blew me away. Women that were generals in the army in the Sandinista revolution and rebel fighters. and also led massive social reform with volunteers and raised healthcare literacy for millions of people. And it just blew me away. I was really excited by those stories. And I'd never heard anything like it. So I found archives and started researching. And in 2014, we went down to shoot with borrowed cameras and made a trailer. And with that, raised the beginnings of the funding to shoot the rest of it, which went on until the end of 2017. We were still shooting. And we premiered in 2018 at South by Southwest, just about 1 year ago today, actually. And yeah, that's where we're at now. And we're super excited to have just been on PBS Doc World this Sunday and to be streaming now. It's been wonderful so far.
Yes, so you can check out Las Sandinistas right now, as she mentioned, on streaming. And then Facing the Dragon will be coming on next Sunday, the 17th. And so you can check that out on air and streaming as well. So let's roll a trailer for Las Sandinistas.
Coming to Doc World.
¿Y por qué te metiste a legalizar?
Para que te fueras famosa, para ver Nicaragua libre.
¿Y por qué más te metiste?
Sí, porque me gustaba. Sí.
Nicaraguan women fought on the front lines of the 1979 Sandinista Revolution, shattering barriers and reshaping their country.
When I joined the Sandinistas, my whole life changed, and I felt so full of life and of possibility.
El exmarido, cuando él no se daba cuenta que tenía granadas, bombas de contacto, rifle 22.
They rose to command and led troops into battle, but fought to be recognized.
We were important during the war, and then we were marginalized.
Men distrusted women, distrusted feminism.
Decades later, they take to the streets again to fight new threats to women and democracy.
Yo pensaba que las cosas eran más fáciles, ¿verdad? Y el tiempo te dice que no son ni tan fáciles ni tan rápidos.
We have to make the revolution all over again.
Las Sandinistas on Doc World.
Well, let's get the conversation started. It is March. It is Women's History Month. Why do you think playing these films, specifically during Women's History Month, is so important? And either one of you can take this.
Jenny, do you want to?
You could go ahead. I was just gabbing away, so.
No, it's a big question. Well, I mean, just looking at Jenny's film, I just felt like I felt such a rush watching your film and just thinking about all these histories of women that we don't know about. And the stories that we don't know about, the experiences and how it changes our idea of how things happened by just knowing that there's this whole history of these women involved in this movement. You know, it changes everything. And so I feel like we've just had these sort of master narratives taught to us, and you know, that's how we see the world. And I feel like something like International Women's Day or Women's Month, and to have programming that really tries to present like counter stories, counter narratives, to say, you know, it wasn't as monolithic as we've been told. I feel as it's really inspiring. You know, it changes how we as women see ourselves in the world, and as people, how we see ourselves in the world. So, you know, I feel like it's always important to know about these other stories and just seeing those images that you have of those women, I just think, wow, they're amazing. And, you know, that this was buried and we don't really have a chance to really celebrate it, and also to, you know, to critique it or whatever that unpacking, you know, entails. So I feel like it continues to be profound, you know, when we create a space for women to talk about their stories.
I think it's really great to see that although these are disparate stories, you've got one in Afghanistan and one in Nicaragua, which are, you know, 8,740 miles apart.
Right.
They're disparate, but they run parallel, and they're also different generations. And I think Dora Maria, in your story, Las Sandinistas, she said that, you know, social progress, it's not linear. It's like a river, it sways back and forth. And you can see that in the timelines in both countries, different parts of the world. So I really was just enthralled by both stories. I also got emotional because I watched them back to back, and I'm like, we have to do better. change and change.
Yeah.
How many steps backwards do we need to take to make this sustainable change? I want to move next to Facing the Dragon, and your story was so intimate and immersive. And I'm wondering, how did you first find your two protagonists? How did you find Shakila and Ilofar? Because they're both so dynamic and just. How did you do that?
Well, it took me a long time to find them. And it took me a long time to convince them to let me film with them on a regular basis. It took about 2 years to get to those scenes that you start to see. I would say probably like a quarter of the way in. Those scenes took a long time for me to build that kind of trust with them. And I basically found them, I spent a summer in Kabul while I was researching. I knew I wanted to do something about women, a new film. And I was really interested in this generation of professional women that had been fostered over the 15 years, or it was 14 years then, of international aid and development. And there was, just out on the streets, you just saw so many professional women in all different, all different aspects of Afghan society, politicians and teachers and loads of journalists and people in the civil service and women activists. And I felt like that might be an interesting story to tell, the story of these women. And then also couched or, up against the fact that 2014 US forces were going to leave Afghanistan and there was going to be fallout for women. I knew that was going to happen. People were writing about it. I don't think it was anything that people didn't see coming. And so I spent a summer interviewing 10 female politicians. I followed around 4 of them. I followed them, filming them in their everyday professional life. And I happened upon Nilofat in the process of filming and trying to meet women. And I wasn't 100% sold on her. I didn't know if she would give me the access, because that's really that was a big part of meeting and filming with women, was that I wanted to see if, first of all, if they had an interesting backstory or a story that could reflect what I was looking for, but then also would they give me access to it over a long period of time, because I knew that I needed to spend a couple of years with them. And then I also wanted to get close to their personal lives. And both of them are mothers. Both of my characters ended up being mothers. I mean, most Afghan women from that generation have had children and families, and then they've gone on to have these professional lives. But so there was a lot of factors involved. And Shakila too, I just met through interviewing lots of journalists, but convincing them to let me film with them was very, very challenging.
I can imagine, because first of all, their safety is already, they're in peril every day. But then you've got yourself, you're a lean crew, but your camera is a presence. Your camera is an identifier. So if they're trying to be secretive in their movements, and yet you have this camera, how did you convince? What was the magic? The magic.
God, I don't know what the magic was. I feel the thing was that for them, and I think this is similar to women in those kinds of jobs. They're very high profile women. I mean, Shakila recognized everywhere she went by journalists and politicians. But these are women like all women in those positions that are used to controlling their image. They didn't have a problem with me filming them. What they had a problem with was who was going to be in control of the story. Because she's a politician, so she's going to want to be in control of the story, and so is Shakila. Shakila is a journalist, so she knew exactly what I was trying to get. So I think they were very savvy in that way. I don't think they were worried about their safety concerns. They were more worried about how is she going to present me? How is the story going to unfold, right? Because I'm a politician and I want to make sure that I look great in every single shot. mean, they both were like, you know, I want to look.
So in a way, you had the two most.
So
in a way, you had the two most difficult subjects possible.
Yes, exactly. I picked, you know, women who are very strong egos, very ambitious, kind of divas, you know, sort of have to be in order to get through, you know, to navigate that kind of world, the hostility that they face. So, I mean, for me, I just had to be real from the day I met them. I had to continue to be real, and I could not hustle them. I was not going to be able to tell them anything that wasn't true. And I think they made me jump through a ton of hurdles, and they saw that I was committed. I think they saw that I was really committed to telling the story. And I feel like at a certain point, they trusted me to know that whatever I was going to do, I just had to spend a lot of time getting rejected and convincing them, and then hanging out with them, and they would see how I worked and how I approached things with them. And they realized that, okay, maybe my intention is different than, you know, I mean, Afghanistan as a story has been, and Afghan women as a story, I mean, there's been a lot of exploitative stories about Afghan women. So when you go to Afghanistan, you want to do a story, that's what you're walking into. You're walking into Afghans feeling very shell-shocked about that and not knowing, like, how are we going to be perceived in the West? And they knew about those things. So I just had to stick it out. And then they realized that I wasn't, you know, I wasn't going to do anything that was going to hurt them, I think, and their families. Yeah.
Now we've got one is relocated to Germany.
Yes.
And then another one's family is in Australia. So where are they now? Where do they stand now, professionally, personally?
Well, Niloufar, my politician, she just won her seat. Re-won her seat as a member of parliament from her province in northeastern Afghanistan. So she campaigned all last summer and she won. So she's going to be holding office for another 5 years in Afghanistan. And her kids are living in Canberra, Australia with their father. So she'll continue to go visit them when she has breaks and then come back to Afghanistan and work. I think she is still probably in the same place now as she was when we leave her at the end of the film. I don't know if she's any more reconciled. And then Shakila, our journalist, she lives in Germany. She lives about 2 hours outside of Frankfurt, Germany, with her children. And she just started a few months ago a part-time job with Deutsche Welle, the news agency. It's a German news agency, which is like the German version of the BBC World. And she works in their Afghan Dadi language service. And so she reports, she does radio stories, and she also writes for their website. And she works about 2 weeks out of the month for them. And I think she's really happy to feel like she's a reporter again, and, you know, and she's learning German. And I think that her asylum case is still an open case, so she hasn't been given permanent asylum in Germany, but I think I'm hopeful that she will at some point. And she's, I think she's getting more accustomed to living in Germany as the years go on. Yes.
Excellent. And remember, folks at home, you can check out Facing the Dragon on Sunday, Sunday, March 17th. That's this coming Sunday on World Channel, and then streaming thereafter. Okay, we're going to switch gears and go over to Jenny for Las Sandinistas. How did you find your characters, and how did you get them to take part in the film?
So the beginning of the question, would you mind repeating it one more time? The audio got a little...
Sure. How did you find your characters, and how did you get them to agree to take part in your documentary?
Yes. So it was kind of a different process than Sadiqa's, but, you know, convincing them was still kind of similar. I had found one of them online. I had read a Wikipedia article about the Nicaraguan federal ban on abortion. under the current revolutionaries that were once these women's Sandinista allies during the revolution. And so I contacted Sophia, and I tried to contact Dora Maria and a number of Nicaraguans I reached out to get Nicaraguan journalists, and then, regional journalists, bureau chiefs of the New York Times in that region, and so on, to try to get the contacts. And then even with those contacts and emailing in Spanish and going back and forth for a while, it took 6 months. They didn't respond initially. And, we were hesitant to go down. I had already gone down once and they hadn't really responded. And it was really complex. So finally we earned the trust of a few people close to them. And I think at that point, they were more willing to give us a chance. I think in their specific positions, they're enemies of the current government. A number of the women, at least the main women that we knew we wanted to interview. So women like Dora Maria or Joconda Belli were outspoken, published critics, of the government. Dora Maria founded an opposition party. And so through the trusted allies, we were able to sort of step by step gain access and convince them to just meet us. And then we made a trailer. And I had this feeling that if the trailer was polished enough, that they would see it and they would believe then that it could kind of be a film and give us more access. So for us, it was very incremental. It was step by step and kind of demonstrating our seriousness. And like Sadiqa said as well, I think getting to know me a little bit, it was important for me, even during those first interviews, for some of the women to talk about, experiences in my own life. One of our characters, Sophia, her brother died, and that was a big part of her life. My dad had just died, and I was relatively young. I'd watched my mom die as well. And so we talked a lot about death of people close to you. And there were a number of things like that where I felt sharing a vulnerable part of my own life was able to sort of open up a door, at least in terms of what we were willing to what they were willing to talk about, and how we were able to sort of get a little bit closer. And Dora Maria is also a politician, like one of the characters and subjects in Facing the Dragon. And so she was much more careful, and she had heard a lot of these questions. She was also a famous warrior, so she'd been interviewed since she was a child. 22 years old, she became a famous, warrior in the country. So she was known as, if you walk around with her today, she's known as Comandante Dos, and people say, guerrillera on the street to her. So, she was less hesitant to be interviewed, but I think sharing more personal details took a little bit more work with Dora Maria and some of the other women. And then we went to the countryside and interviewed a number of women when we finally raised a little money. That was one of our goals, was to allow the women who fought but had never been able to share the chance and the space to talk about their experiences. The women in the countryside that don't have cell phones, that don't have email. It's a really rural country in a lot of parts of these regions. And even electricity for us was really hard to get there, so we would have to be really, really strategic in getting out there and staying out there. But we would just go to the villages and ask everyone, do you know women who fought? Do you know women who fought? And just talk on the streets with people. And certainly in Nicaragua, that's how a lot of things get done. If you really want something done, you're gonna have to walk to the house. You're gonna have to chat with the neighbors. And it's fun. It's fun. It's very different than the US in that way. There's a lot of chatting. And so that's how we met a lot of the other women, that are less well-known and have been less publicized in Nicaragua.
Well, both of your stories are across international borders. And I know that safety is an issue in both places. And obviously the current political climate in Nicaragua, Dora Maria specifically running against the current political regime. Did you ever fear for your safety? And people who are trying to make stories, again, across borders, do you have any recommendations for young filmmakers or filmmakers starting out? This is your first documentary feature, and that's a pretty big undertaking for your first effort. What advice can you give people to do the same?
Sadiqa will probably have a lot to say about this too. It's my first. You have no idea what you're getting into. I didn't, which was a good thing, I think, because it would have been, had I known, you're just like, oh my goodness. you'd have really had to think about it in a different way.
It is a good thing. It is a good thing.
Right? It's a good thing, because if you're like 5 years down the line, and you're still jumping through these hoops, and it's wild. I would say to younger people, I don't think I would change anything that I did. On the other hand, too, I would say, goodness, what would I recommend? For me, I think the biggest hurdle for us, and at least getting it done quickly, financing. I'd say if there's a way where you can control as many of the variables as you can on your end, that's a good thing. And I think I wrote interviews before I went down, but I didn't have a sense of the art necessarily exactly, of which characters and how they would exactly fit together. I think it would be advisable, at least, to put on paper a potential arc with certain characters. I think even if you veer away from it, to have maybe 1 or 2 very rough outlines of how you want the plot to go, what you think the big scenes and the emotional turning points could be. So you have something like a script, even though it will change inevitably and characters will do or say different things, than you ever expected. But I'd say that would help. So you're really guided, so you really know. And I think we did half of that work, I'd say, initially, but we could have done more. The other thing I'd say is, in terms of safety, I felt like being a woman was a little bit of an advantage for me, because really they didn't think I was a filmmaker. And, when they check our equipment going down, part of it is also that I look so pale, so I look like a tourist. I look like this gringa hippie. And I don't think the government took us very seriously either, because we were young and we looked like tourists. And that was an advantage. And I say play to your advantages. If you're young, if you're a woman, or you're, depending on your background, whatever you can use to your advantage. That might seem like a disadvantage up front. I think really helped us. I don't think the government, I think they really didn't think it was a serious project. And we would always talk about the history aspect of it and less about the current day aspect, even though we knew the current day would be a big part of it. And we knew the current day was very controversial. Because these women, a lot of them were enemies of the government. They'd been in jail, some of them. So we knew that was a danger. But we also knew if we were interviewing people from the party as well, we were really making an effort to be broad, that we would probably attract less attention. And really having people talk about those memories. People love to talk about memories, and it's much less controversial than the current day politics. So.
Great answer. Very comprehensive. So I want to ask you, Sadiqa, you first. What's the reception been like to your film in the communities that it was shot?
The reaction in the communities, like where I've gone, the festivals and things like that, or within the Afghan community?
The Afghan community, yes. Both abroad and here in the States.
Well, I haven't shown it in Afghanistan, and I don't plan to show it in Afghanistan. I can't really show the film in Afghanistan. So I'm not sure how it would be received in Afghanistan. I can't show it simply because, not so much because of Shekilah's story, but because Niloufar is still an active politician there. There's a lot of personal scenes with her children and with her family that she and I just felt, and she would rather not be shown in Afghanistan as well. I mean, look, I didn't make the film for Afghans in Afghanistan. I made the film for people outside of Afghanistan, honestly. But I'm not sure how they would receive it. I've been to screenings in Europe, and I just came from a screening in DC where there were Afghans from the diaspora, if you will, who had come to see the film, and it's always been really positive, their response. So that makes me really happy. I feel like it's always powerful when you see yourself up on the screen and you see, some aspect of your culture, being talked about. So that's been really positive. And the festivals, the audiences in general have been very responsive, I would say.
That's amazing.
Thanks.
And Jenny, what about your film?
What was the question again?
I
was really excited by her answer, but I forgot the question.
You were?
I was. Yeah.
What's the response been to your film? in the community that you shot. Here in the States as well.
So we also have not shown it in Nicaragua, although we did plan to in September. They had political violence break out in April that was really extreme. So a lot of the women, including Dora Maria in the film, are living in clandestinity again and are on the terrorist list.
Wow.
So it's a very complicated time there. It continues to be. And it was crazy that it happened about a month after we premiered the film. And so I went back and changed the cut after the premiere as well to integrate some of the new information, some of the new footage. So we had scheduled to go in September, and then the Young Festival that we were supposed to show with in Managua, they were on the terrorist list as well. And they'd all either, I think, been captured or sort of just went into exile. So now we are then going to show it in December again, but then that also evaporated. So we're talking with some students there. I'm talking with some young doctors that I met at a screening in Chicago that have clinics in the countryside. So we're talking about, we have like about 50 DVDs that we were going to bring for house screenings. We want to be very careful though, because people can really get thrown in jail if it's seen as an anti-government event in any way. So we're still planning that. I'm planning an event on the border of Costa Rica and Nicaragua, because there's about 50,000 exiles currently living there. So we were going to do a little fundraiser to help the women Nicaraguan exiles there. So we're organizing that. And let's see, in the US, I think the response has been, and it's amazing when we get women, I think most women, especially women from any country in Latin America, I think can relate to the women's stories, because it's really about the invisibility and about the erasure of women from history and sort of from their own lives in a certain way, from the world that they helped create. And the story, it covers 50 years, almost like decades of these women's lives, from childhood as activists into the current day, leading hunger strikes on the streets. So you really see this arc with them. You go through their divorces with them, you go through being single moms and leading ministries in the new government in a really exciting, hopeful way, into being thrown out of the government in these kind of grotesque ways and sexual harassment. So the movie really, I think, encompasses a lot. So I do think the response has been one of, identity. I think even the youngest girls, I've been really happy to show it at schools. I really think the younger generation tends to get it. The teenagers now. So that's been really exciting for me. Yeah.
Well, we are almost out of time now, but I want to just commend you both. It seems like you were capturing movements in time and movements in places, and the films themselves have become movements. So really proud of the efforts that you all make. Thank you so much for sharing yourselves and your stories with us. If you want to find out more about the films, you can check us out online, worldchannel.org, on social @worldchannel. Again, thank you so much for joining us. If you have any more questions for the filmmakers, you can find them online, find us online, on social, and we'll respond. And stay tuned for the next conversation we have next month. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye, ladies. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.